Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right in to explore a fascinating and honestly incredibly transformative piece of ancient text, Isaiah 58. Whether you know this passage like the back of your hand, or you're hearing about it for the very first time, our goal today is to unpack its core message using the structured insights straight from our source material. We're going to be talking about waiting, authenticity, and some truly profound promises. Let's get right into it.
To kick things off, let me ask you something. Have you ever stayed awake through a really long night, just tossing and turning, wondering when morning would finally come? It's a deeply universal human feeling, isn't it? Our source uses this imagery to immediately connect with that profound experience of waiting in the dark for a spiritual sunrise. It points out that the darker the night feels, well, the more precious that eventual sunrise becomes. It's the perfect way to frame the internal and external struggles that this text tackles.
Okay, let's dive into our first major theme, the long dark night, and what happens when rituals feel empty.
Right out of the gate, Isaiah 58 throws down a pretty massive challenge. It highlights this fascinating but honestly heartbreaking conflict where people were actively fasting, praying, and doing all the technically right religious activities, but their hearts? Completely disconnected. They were going through the motions but feeling nothing but the darkness. We see a really stark contrast here. On one side, you've got everything happening inside the religious building, representing those empty, performative rituals done just for the sake of checking a box. But on the flip side, you have what happens outside those walls, which the text defines as how we actually treat people in our everyday lives. The source makes a powerful argument here. True faith isn't found in a safe, performative bubble. It's actively revealed through genuine boots-on-the-ground compassion.
Moving right along to our next section, principles over empty promises and the call to compassion.
The core argument our source pulls from Isaiah 58 is that, well, human nature often wants the reward without putting in the work. We want God's promises, sure, but we kind of want to bypass the principles of humility and obedience. But the text totally flips that script. It invites readers into a lifestyle grounded in genuine compassion and active obedience. It's a massive shift from self-focused religion to other-focused service. And to show us what this actually looks like in the real world, the source points straight to how Jesus demonstrated true faith. He fed the hungry. He welcomed the rejected. He healed the sick, forgave sinners, and loved the unlovable. The point here is simple but profound. The world doesn't need more religious arguments or empty rituals. What it desperately needs is more of this active, practical light.
And this brilliantly illustrates the direct connection between those actions and the teachings of Jesus himself. In Matthew 5:16 it says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Our source emphasizes that when people actually live out those practical acts of compassion, they are literally shining a spotlight into the dark night. It is a one-to-one direct cause and effect. You do good deeds, you generate spiritual light. It's that simple.
But I know what you might be thinking. Where do I even start? Well, the source breaks it down into wonderfully simple, accessible steps. We should never, ever underestimate a simple act of love. We're talking about one encouraging word, just one helping hand, one single prayer. We're sharing just one meal with someone in need. The text argues that your simple act of kindness or generosity might just be the exact sermon that someone actually remembers. Or better yet, it might literally be the answer to a prayer they've been crying out in their own dark night. You really just never know the ripple effect of a single, genuine act of service.
And that brings us to a major turning point in our explainer. The three great promises: light, answered calls, and guidance. The source completely shifts gears here. We move away from the challenging commands of compassion and zoom in on the specific, incredibly powerful rewards detailed in Isaiah 58. These are the promises that follow a life dedicated to active service. Let's look at the first major promise from verse 8. "Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear." It is such a beautiful image of sudden, overwhelming relief, isn't it? But, according to our source material, there is a massive grammatical pivot point hidden right at the very beginning of this sentence. And honestly, it makes this entire promise possible.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this single, heavily weighted word, then. Our source places immense emphasis on this. It proves that God's promises of light breaking forth and healing appearing are entirely conditional. Then implies a sequence, right? The change only begins to happen after people are actively walking in that obedience and compassion we just talked about.
But once that condition is actually met, the promises just keep flowing. Check out the second promise from verse 9. "Then you will call, and the Lord will answer." The source points out what an incredible privilege this is, and it makes sure to clarify that the Creator doesn't answer because anyone has perfectly earned it through some flawless track record. No, it's entirely by grace. When a heart is surrendered and actively living out those principles of compassion, the text says heaven is no longer silent, and suddenly, that surrendered heart can hear the answer so much more clearly.
And that leads us straight into the third and honestly perhaps the most comforting promise found in verse 11. The Lord will guide you always. Just soak in the absolute certainty of that final word, always. The source stresses that this promise of guidance is not conditional on your circumstances being perfect. It doesn't just apply when life is a breeze or when you happen to be feeling super strong.
In fact, the source specifically outlines when this guidance is most vital. It kicks in when the road curves totally unexpectedly. It applies when your plans just completely fall apart. It applies when you feel like your strength is entirely gone. The text goes out of its way to reassure the reader that faithfulness remains constant through these very specific, very real human hardships. It emphasizes again that a surrendered heart is going to find direction even in the absolute most disorienting and exhausting times of life.
Let's transition into our final section. Dawn follows the darkness and a message of hope.
The source pauses here to speak directly to anyone who might be hearing all these promises but still feels like they are stuck living in the pitch black. You know, you've tried your best at compassion and obedience, but the morning just hasn't arrived yet. Think about that difficult emotional journey for a second. You faithfully prayed, then you patiently waited, then you cried tears of pure sorrow and frustration. But look at where this timeline inevitably ends. Dawn follows the night. The source material offers some profound reassurance here. It argues that the timing is never, ever late. It urges you not to lose heart because your healing is on the way, your joy is returning, and your ultimate testimony? It's being written right now, right in the messy middle of this waiting period.
So, what are you supposed to do while you wait for that dawn to break? The text gives us 4 very specific actions to maintain. Keep trusting, keep serving, keep praying, keep loving. By actively continuing these behaviors, especially when it's the last thing you want to do, you are leaning into the very principles of Isaiah 58 that we discussed at the start of this explainer. You are actively choosing to live by the principles rather than just sitting back and demanding the promises.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought, directly inspired by the closing prayer of our source text. So, what does this all mean for you? How might your own simple acts of love become a shining testimony that points others to Jesus Christ? I really challenge you to reflect on that. How are you going to bring the message of Isaiah 58 to life in your own actions this week? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this amazing text. Until next time, keep learning and keep shining that light.